Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This week's video is not actually this piece behind. No, that's a commission that I'm working on. Something that you've seen before, so I'm not going to do a video on it again. This one is the piece that I'm working on today. So this little table is oak, and it was something my mum picked up for me from a local charity shop because she knows I like a little bit of oak. The plan was to kind of strip it and do something very simple with leaving a bit of wood and maybe a little bit of paint. However, the problem with this top is that it has some stains. Now, I have stripped this off, so the original finish is off, but the stains are deep in the grain of the wood, and I've sanded it. I have tried bleach, I have tried barkeeper's friend, I've tried everything, I've thrown everything at it, and those swirl marks are not lifting. So we're going to go for a plan B. Because I've already done some work on it as well, this piece has already been cleaned using Dixie Belle's White Lightning, and I have also sanded it off because obviously I was trying to sand the top back because that's the part that was going to keep wood. So the prep has already been done. So I wanted to incorporate this paper somehow onto this table. It's too small a size to fit over the top, so I'm not going to be able to put it on the top, but I might put it on the little shelf underneath. And I am going to use Dixie Belle's Bond Emboss Primer on this because it's oak, and I'm going to use a fairly lightish green colour to match the decoupage paper. So I'm going to put the Bond Emboss on the top of this table. I'm also putting it on the edges here, and I'm going to hopefully do a little bit of a decoupage, paint and wood combination. So anywhere that I'm going to put either paint or decoupage paper, I'm going to undercoat using Dixie Belle's Bond Emboss Primer. So this is going to stop bleed through. And the specific reason I'm using white, because this primer you can actually get in 3 different colours. You can get it in grey, clear and white. The reason I'm using white is because I always undercoat my decoupage in white. That way your colours in your paper don't go kind of muddy, or you can't see the colours underneath the paper. So if I was to undercoat this decoupage paper in grey primer, for example, you would see a little bit of that grey primer underneath the paper. It would be apparent in some of the paler florals and things like that. So for your colours to remain true and vibrant to your decoupage paper, I would always recommend using white underneath, and this white primer is going to block stains and also provide that white undercoat. So the plan is to put this new decoupage paper on this little shelf, and possibly also here. I do have a second pack just in case I need it. So I am going to just trim this down a little bit. I want to get some of the pink flowers on, maybe that little blue one as well. So I'm just going to trim it on this side. This is going to be a little bit tricky because we've got like the legs are sort of recessed into this base shelf, so it's not a complete square or rectangle. We've got a little bit of a fiddly situation here, but it should be okay. It should be fine. So I'm going to use, yeah, I want that big pink flower on it because I think the pink and green should always be seen. That's what I say. So I'm going to trim it down a little bit on this side, and then I'm just not grappling with so much paper when I'm trying to stick it down. I'm not cutting this down exactly to the size of that base shelf. I'm giving myself a slight overhang because I like to sand the edges of decoupage paper once it's dry to give it a nice kind of tidy edge. So I'm just giving myself a little slight overhang, but this way I'm getting rid of the bulk of the paper that is going to kind of get in my way once I'm fiddling around with it. So to stick it down, as always, I'm going to be using Dixie Belle's Satin Clear Coat. So I'm just going to put a very thin, even layer over this little shelf. So this product that I'm using is actually one of Dixie Belle's top coats that you usually finish your piece with to seal it and give it durability. The good thing about the satin top coat is that it's like a gel kind of consistency, which makes it really good for decoupage because it's not too sticky. I've used other products in the past specifically for decoupage that are very sticky and tacky, that mean you get very little room for error. If you want to shuffle your paper around or lift it like I just did, you can't really do that with anything too sticky because it rips the paper. So this top coat is absolutely perfect for decoupage. So that's stuck. There are a couple of wrinkles in it, and I used this technique. I did this technique a couple of videos back because I saw it on Facebook. I saw somebody else doing it and I can't remember who it was, and I wish I could so I could give them credit. But all you need is a piece of plastic essentially to sit in between your decoupage paper, which is still obviously a little bit delicate because it's wet and we've just stuck it down, and an ink brayer. So I'm just going to put that down on top of the paper, and then I'm going to use the ink brayer to basically roll out any imperfections in the paper. And this way you're not putting tension or pressure directly on top of the paper, so you're not going to cause it to rip or catch or damage, but you can press down quite hard with this, and it's the perfect way of eliminating wrinkles, creases, air bubbles, anything like that in decoupage paper. It works super well. So this is done before your decoupage paper has had a chance to dry out. That way you can eliminate any air bubbles and wrinkles. I usually start in the middle and work my way out, and just make sure you do put something in between your ink roller and your decoupage. So to combat these awkward corners, because we've kind of got to get the paper to wrap around the legs on each corner, I'm just going to use a craft knife, and this hasn't dried yet. So I've just got to be super careful, and I'm just going to take a craft knife and just slice a slit upwards on the paper, which is going to allow it to fold around the leg. And I'm just going to press it down, and then I'm going to leave it to dry. I'm not going to trim it yet. I always trim my decoupage paper once it's completely dry, because if it's wet, it's just more delicate. You're more likely to get it to rip in the wrong places if you try it when it's wet. So I'm just going to make that slit on all four corners and just make sure that it's pushed down really well right up to the legs, and then just let it dry. I managed to get a little bit of a close-up here for you, just in case you didn't know what I meant. So I'm just using that corner of the leg to kind of score a rough kind of line, and obviously the paper is fighting with itself because it wants to lie flat, but it can't because it's trying to go around a corner. So that slit that I've just done upwards is going to allow the paper to sit either side of that little bit of the leg which it needs to kind of go around, and then I'm just going to press it down, leave it to dry. I mentioned that I wanted to try and put the decoupage paper in these panels as well, and I think I'm just going to be able to do it. So I'm just going to put the paper in and then score it with my nail to create a template, because they are kind of tapered out, and then just cut out that template, but perhaps leave a slight overhang, because whenever I cut out templates I always seem to have not done it properly. I don't know what it is, I don't know why, but for some reason I'd never have quite enough paper, and obviously if you've got a gap, you can see the white paint underneath. If you have a little bit too much paper, you can quite easily trim it down, but if you haven't got enough, it's much harder to disguise. Some people make templates and do it really well, and it works an absolute charm, but for some reason every time I've done it, it's never worked out. So this is just how I prefer to do it. If it's in a recessed kind of thing like this, then I'll always kind of trim it down later with a craft knife, and I'm using exactly the same technique as I did on the base shelf. So I'm using Satin clear coat for the adhesive, just painting that on the white area, which is where I'm going to decoupage, pressing it down flat and leaving it to dry. Now I'm risking it a little bit because I haven't got my painting clothes on, but I want to get a coat of paint on this before I have to go and pick the kids up from school. So the colour that I'm going to use is a chalk mineral paint shade, and it's called Olive Wood. Really pretty shade, and I think it's going to work really nicely with the green in the background of the decoupage paper. When you're using chalk mineral paint, always have a little bottle of tap water on hand for a little spritz. I always like to spritz my dry brush to start off with, just to moisten the bristles. And then I'm going to very lightly come down, lower, lower. I'm going to very lightly spritz the top of this, only a light spritz. And then I'm going to, whoa, look at the coverage of that. And then I'm going to put a coat of this on. If I go over the edge a little bit, it doesn't matter because I can just wipe it off or sand it off. But I'm going to try and be neat for once. I mean, you totally could use masking tape here to mask the area off, but as you know, I do not like using masking tape because I can't be bothered with it. So if I go over, I'll just sand it back because the bits of the oak that you can see is raw oak, so it's absolutely fine. And this colour is called Olive Wood. It's from Dixie Belle's Chalk Mineral Paint range. It's quite a recent colour that they've released, and as always, I will link all of the products, including the decoupage paper that I've used, in the link below. They are affiliate links. I'll get the words out. They are affiliate links, which means if you click on them and make a purchase, I earn a small commission from that, but it won't cost you a penny more. So once the decoupage paper has completely dried, you can then trim the edges. So if I've got an overhang like this, I'll use a sanding sponge to trim away the edges. If it's going to go around like a recess or a corner, then obviously you can't sand because there's no lip to sand off, so that's when you're going to have to use a craft knife. Again, I will link this craft knife below as well. It's a really decent knife. I just got it off Amazon, and the blades are refillable, so you can just buy a pack of blades, and when they get blunt you can just change them over. But it's a really sharp, decent craft knife, and really good for decoupage. So the bit that's overhanging I'm going to sand off, and then around the legs I'm just going to really carefully trim. And then, as always with decoupage, your corners and your edges are what's going to lift. If you haven't quite gone up to them, you know, with enough kind of top coat to stick it down. So I like to go round all the edges and corners with an artist brush and just kind of flick the edges to see if they're going to lift, which if they do, it's absolutely not a problem. You can just get your satin clear coat out like I'm doing now and just go along the edge and make sure that it's properly sealed. So for this kind of little recess bit here panel, I'm going to have to trim with a craft knife. This is sped up, so it's a very slow process because obviously you want to get a nice straight edge. I've tried to do it with rulers and stuff in the past, but to be honest, they make it hard work because vintage furniture very rarely has any straight lines, because obviously wood is a little bit of an uneven surface. It's not perfectly flat. So I like to score it with my nail and then use the craft knife, and that way I found you do get a kind of true to fit piece of decoupage. And then obviously the bottom is an overhang, so I can sand that back as I did the other bits. And then it's just a case of adding more of your top coat. So as well as sticking the decoupage paper down, I'm going to seal it as well. And this is quite important because you want to add protection onto your decoupage. I don't usually wax over the top of decoupage. I always like to put a top coat down first because I think it offers better durability. At the end of the day, you have stuck paper on a piece of furniture, so you do need to protect it. And I feel like a top coat is better than a wax to do that. I sometimes add decorative effects over the top of the clear coat, so you could put a brown wax over if you wanted to antique it. I'm not going to on this particular one, but you can do. And I usually do 2 to 3 coats of clear coat. I'm using satin again, just to give it a nice sort of sheen. And then for any areas that I'd gone over with the primer, like I said, I'm on raw oak, so I'm going to sand that back to get a nice clean edge. And I use satin clear coat for the top as well. I'm using a foam and dandy brush to apply this because I'm not a pro at top coating at all, because I usually use wax, but I feel like because I've used satin clear coat everywhere else on this piece, I kind of want it to match, and I also want the sheen level to be the same. Also, it is a side table, so the satin clear coat is going to offer a little bit more protection and durability than a wax. So these foam and dandy brushes, it's actually a foam pad attached to a kind of paintbrush handle, and because there's no bristles, you get a very smooth, streak-free finish on your top coats. Highly recommend these brushes for top coating. It saves me a lot of stress and streakiness. As always, there's a few close-ups of the finished look. I love this piece. It's very kind of shabby chic kind of style, but I love the colours all together, and I love the fact that it's got a little bit of oak in there as well, which kind of just works really nicely with the colours of the paper. I've got a lawnmower in the background today for my outro, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Thank you for watching the video. As always, make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube channel for more videos like this one, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!